Turn in your Bibles, if you would, to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We're going to pick up at verse 24. For those of you who didn't know that I would be here today, I apologize that you did not have warning enough to get a snack. I will do my best. Melissa must have had prior knowledge, because when she walked in and saw me, she showed me her bag of Cheez-Its. So she's ready. So usually I open up with a funny story, but as I was telling Kelly on the way in this morning, the funny stories I've gotten down to in my memory bank aren't pulpit approved. They're from my before Jesus days, so I had to find a joke, so I found a joke this morning. We'll see how good it is, and if Joel Osteen has used it, I don't know that he's used it, because I didn't see it this morning, but he may have used it, and he probably told it a lot funnier than me. But anyhow, so 3 guys did not walk into a bar. 3 guys died in a car crash. They went to heaven. They showed up for their first day of orientation. I didn't know you had orientation in heaven, but apparently you do. They showed up for the first day of orientation. They were asked one question. This was their first question. As your friends, family, and loved ones, as they go past your casket at your funeral, what is it that you hope that they will say about you? And the first one, he thought, and his answer was, I would like to hear them say that I was one of the greatest doctors of my time and a great man. The second guy says, I would like to hear them say that I was a wonderful husband and school teacher and made a huge difference in our children of tomorrow. The last guy, he thought for a minute, and then he replied, hey, he moved. True story. I told Kelly. No, this is the true story part. That was the joke. This is the true story part. True story, I told Kelly, I said 2 things at my funeral. I don't make a lot of requests, but these 2 things I want to have happen. 1, get the funeral started, and about 15 minutes later, roll my casket in, because I've never been on time anywhere, and I ain't going to be on time there. My dad just cringed back there. Number 2, I have been in this church that is wonderful at special effects for all of these years. We have done a tremendous amount of wonderful things, all in the name of the Lord. At my funeral, Tim Steele needs to rig my body so that at the right point, it sits up in the casket. No pressure, Tim. You got to outlive me. Now, we all had a good laugh. And to give you all comfort, you see my phone on the pulpit. This is not so that my wife can text me and tell me you shouldn't have said that. I know that your mind cannot endure but so much. And so I time myself so that I know how hungry you are. So with that, let's get started. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. It says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body, make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. I've entitled this sermon, It Will Be Worth It All. And as I shared with Kelly in preparation of this, I have one sentence in my head that someone needs to hear today. And so at least one person in here is going to get that one sentence. But the rest of you got to get all this other stuff so I can get the time to get down to that one sentence. I was researching the book of Corinthians to understand why it was written, where it was written, all that good stuff. And one of the things that I found really interesting about the book of Corinthians is that it is believed to be the book that has the most evidence, the most occurrences of corrective instruction to a church. So let me tell you about the church at Corinth. In case you can't figure that out, the Corinthians are the people that lived in a place called Corinth. This was a letter written from the Apostle Paul to that church. So this is how he established a church. He went on this, I believe this was his second mission trip. That's funny. This is his second deployment as a missionary. And he stayed in the city of Corinth for about 18 months and established his church with a team, and then he had to leave and move on. So he made it to Ephesus, the Ephesians. How about that? Yeah, there you go. Okay, so he made it to Ephesus. And when he got to Ephesus, he had been there for a little while, and then he gets a letter from the leaders of the church at Corinth. And they're dealing with two things primarily. One is issues in the church. The church got issues? Amen, right? Hospitals, not hotels, man. We got us a heap of issues, right? As long as you got people in the church, you'll have issues. Okay, so the Corinthian church, they had some issues. And then the leaders had some questions about some things that they hadn't really uncovered yet and just wanted, Paul's opinion about how you deal with it. So this kind of falls out on the side of the equation of the questions. So chapter 9 is where he gets into answering some of the questions that they had asked. And the question that this is really speaking to is where they had begun to ask him about liberty. So we as Christians, once we've been set free, we're free. Okay? Paul says, I'm a free man. I can do almost anything, But some things it's not good for me to do. Some things it's not best for me to do. And so the Corinthian church was wrestling with this concept of how do we be free but not be bad? I mean, really, if you want to boil it down. And so if you look at the section of Scripture right above this passage, starting in verse 19, you kind of see how Paul speaks about how he uses his freedom to leverage ministry. He uses his freedom to further the gospel. He uses his freedom to do things that someone who is bound under certain laws may not be able to do. But how many of you know that if you spend a lot of time talking about all the things you can do, if you don't put guardrails up, it won't be long before you find yourself off-road somewhere. And so this passage of Scripture in verse 24 through the end of the chapter is somewhat of a beginning of the guardrails. It's kind of a conceptual guardrails around how do we handle this freedom that we have. If your Bible's like mine, it entitled the section, The Need for Self-Discipline. And so I think it's important that we keep that in focus as what this passage is speaking to is how are we to discipline? How are we to live? And so I think it's really interesting that what Paul does here is he begins to talk about a race. Many of you who have been around me, I'm an athlete, or I was. I'm the guy in a Letterman in a 1990s Corvette in the parking lot now, but, I used to be an athlete. I used to be a champion. Yeah. Anyways. So anytime Paul starts, the Bible doesn't talk about athletics a whole lot, so when it does, I get really excited. And I had this beautiful football illustration worked out for you guys, as I'm sure you expect, but not today. The next time I speak, I might get to talk about football. I'm just going to use what Paul used, because Paul's a whole lot smarter than me. I ain't wrote any books in the Bible yet, and Paul wrote a bunch of them. So we're going to go with Paul's analogy here, right? Okay, so Paul's talking about the race. And I was doing some research, and Matthew Henry, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that guy. He's dead now. Well, he may be alive. He's probably on the other side of alive. He's just not alive here on earth. Anyways, he's like back 1600s kind of guy. Okay, so Matthew Henry, I was reading his commentary, and he actually called these out. I wrote this name down because I knew I would not remember it. But he referenced that in this part of Greece, that in Corinth, they had these things called the Isthmian Games. Some of you guys who are deeper in history than I am, that may mean a whole lot more to you than it does to me. To me, it just means it's something, it's kind of like Olympics or something, But anyway, so they had these games that regularly occurred in this area. And so all these people that received this letter from Paul would have been familiar with this. So he begins to reference this running of the race. And so in verse 24, he gets right to the point. And that'll be our first point today is you need to be in it to win it. If you're going to be in this race, you need to go for the win. So as he begins to call this out, I was just so taken aback. I mean, it's so unapologetic, so unashamed, so different than what we hear a lot of in our culture today in terms of the church. But he says in verse 24, run in such a way as to get the prize. And so again, reading some of Matthew Henry's commentary on, some of his thoughts on this, he points out that in the church, we're real big on not being competitive with other bodies, right? I mean, everyone in this church knows that our stance is we will help other churches as much as we can. We help them in their missions arena. We help them in their youth ministries. We help them in their outreaches. We do whatever we can as teammates, and that doesn't need to change. But what we lose sometimes in that is that sometimes against pure athletes, competition is a very good motivator. And that if we go through life not trying to be the best, if we don't live our life with conviction that there is a race to run and there is a race to win, then we will be very tempted to just go alone. We'll be very tempted to accept a participation ribbon. Amen, right? Can I get an amen for the participation ribbon? Man, I prayed last night. I said, Lord, help me not to meddle. I'm getting close. But as Christians, we need to remember that there is a race and that it is imperative that we run it in a way as if we were running a race to win. That we have to be hungry for it. That we have to strive. That we float. Okay. That we can't be a jellyfish and just go where the tides take us. We have to be a champion rowing team. You know what I mean? Like, we got to work at it. We got to go. And like, please don't mistake what I'm saying. Your works ain't going to get you into heaven. You're kind of like Mama used to say whenever I'd bring a new girl home. She'd say, where'd she go to church? And I'd say, I'll find out. What Mama was teaching me was, a girl going to church doesn't make her a Christian, but a Christian girl will go to church. Okay? Same thing here. Your works aren't going to get you into heaven. But if you're a Christian, you'd probably be working. Just saying, So be in it to win it. Don't be willing to accept, we're out for a jog, We're staying in shape, We can't go through our Christian walk. We can't go through the spreading of the gospel. We can't go through missions. We can't go through youth ministry. We can't go through the things that go with the Christian walk. We can't go through them, willing to accept that, as long as we finish the race, that's good. It's not about finishing. It's about winning. Point number 2. Keep your eye on the prize. You see before you today, we have 2 crowns. I don't know if you noticed that those were 2 crowns. I don't know if any, there's a table up there. We have 2 crowns. I'm going to move one crown. I'm not going to move the other. I'm going to move this one because I have to give a shout out to Miss Hannah Boliner, who fashioned this for me as I was, I think it would be worn like this actually. As I was frantically working through illustrations last night, she said, I think I can make that. So, okay, well, thank you. This is a crown, very similar, except it's made out of fake stuff that's synthetic, that wouldn't have existed back then. But the leaves and such, very similar to what the winner of one of these races would have been given as their prize. Okay? So the Isthmian Games, the race, the fights in the arena, whatever, you win. I'm just saying. I mean, we want to make sure we understand what the Scripture's saying here, right? We want to make sure we get it. Verse 25, he says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. And I'm probably going to sit here for a minute on this point, because this is, to me, one of the things that we in the church, we in America, do the worst at. We forget that we ain't living for here. We forget that we're not living for our 2,000 square foot houses. We forget that we're not living, I'm going to go BMW, for BMW in the driveway. I was going to go with a Bentley, but I was like, man, ain't none of us living for a Bentley in the driveway. That church down the street, that ain't this church. We forget that we're not living for Lily Pulitzer dresses. We forget that we're not living for the things of today. We're living for a life of tomorrow. We're too busy competing for this crown. We're too busy, striving and driving and trying to get to that crown, and we ain't giving one thought to the crown on the other side. The reason why I think it's so important to remember which one of the two that you're fighting for is because when it comes time to train, when it comes time to put your body through self-discipline, when it comes time to say no to the hard things, if you don't remember which crown you're fighting for, I'm just being honest with you, humans ain't that strong. We're not that dedicated. We'll do what we want to do, and what we want to do is we want to drive a BMW, and we want to live in our 2,000 square foot houses, and we want to have piles of cash in our 401k, and we want to have financial security and stability, and that's what we're focused on as a people. And notice I did say we, because I'm here to tell you, as I prepared through this, I went, yes, Lord. Can I preach something I'm good at? He said, no, this is it. This is where we all are. This is where all of us are struggling. This is what we all need to understand, that we have got to turn the tide on. We've got to be focused on what the real prize is. We've got to be focused on where we're headed, not where we are. Now, most of you know, by show of hands, we're going to take a quick poll. How many of you know that when I'm a little stressed, or it's hot, or there's a day that ends in Y, I really enjoy either a Coca-Cola or a Mountain Dew? Raise your hand. The rest of y'all need to get to know me better. There's not a Sunday I don't come to church without a Coke. Except, 2 Sundays out of the year when y'all fasting, I feel guilty about it. When I played football, I drank one soft drink a week during the season. Do you know why? Because on Monday, at the end of practice, we ran 8 40-yard dashes. 40 down, 40 back, that's one. On Tuesday, we ran 40, 30, 20, and 10. On Wednesday, we ran 5 50s. That's half a football field, down and back. And on Thursday, we got to loaf a little. On Friday, we played. I drank one Mountain Dew a week back then because when I sweated, I did not sweat out Mountain Dew. And if I drank a Mountain Dew a day, them 50s would hurt. Them 40s wouldn't feel too good. And the truth is that if I had put those things into my body then, more than likely, I would not have been able to perform at the level I did perform at. Now, I love Mountain Dew. I really like Coke. And it's a miracle that I can drink it, but I'll explain that on another day. Really, a bona fide miracle. 4th of July prayer. God, anyways, that's another story for another day. But I loved what I was able to do more than I loved the drink. And that was with a high school brain. You know what I mean? It's important. I love to hear you laugh. It's important for us. We will never get this right. I'm just telling you, we will never live to the level that we're supposed to live to if we can't see past the casket. If we can't see to the other side of the grave, we will never accomplish what the Lord planned for us to accomplish. Because we are so focused on this little blip in time. When you compare that to everything in eternity, this ain't nothing. You know? So point number 1, be in it to win it. Point number 2, keep your eye on the prize. Point number 3, be intentional. So as we pick back up in verse 26, it says, therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. I don't run, so I don't run aimlessly. If you see me running, you better run too. Because I do prescribe to the theory that you don't have to be the fastest person. You just got to be able to trip somebody. So I don't understand the concept of running aimlessly. But as I get it, as I think through this on an intellectual level, I guess it means like going out for an afternoon jog. We should add those people to the prayer list. The ones that go out for afternoon jogs, especially in the summertime. It's hot. Anyways. Paul says that when I'm in this race, there isn't time for a Sunday afternoon jog. Every run I take, every time I'm on the field, every time I'm in the games, it ain't no game. It's a real fight. And so I'm intentional about every move I make. Every time I go running, it's for a purpose. Every time I'm competing, it's to win. Every time. There is no, let's just go. There is no, let's just have the experience. There's a race to win. When you look at our resources and when you look at the time, which is everyone's most valuable resource, frankly speaking, we don't have time for Sunday afternoon jogs. I don't know how up to date you are on world events. And I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of end time prophecy. I'll just tell you, if I was a betting man, I'd be betting it's going to happen soon. And I read statistics out of the AG World Missions publications, and there's still a whole lot of people that ain't even heard the name Jesus. I mean, our priorities, folks. Which crowns are we chasing? We don't have time for aimless ministry. We don't have time to be engaged in things that aren't going to bear fruit. We don't have time. I mean, they could be good things. They could be things that the church has done for decades. But if it's not going to yield the fruit, we don't have time for it. We need to be serious. We need to be intentional. We need to, as he was saying, he talks about a boxer beating the air. Think about a guy in the gym with them little bags. That's great, that's building skill, but, why do that while Mike Tyson's beating on your head? You know what I mean? How dumb would that look? I'm just saying. Put that mental image in your head. The thing that hangs in the gym, it's got the little bag on it. Everybody seen Rocky? Okay. Apollo Creed over here on the other side of Rocky doing on Rocky's head. It'd be real dumb for Rocky to be doing this still, right? That's where we are, okay? We have to be intentional. We're at a time where I'm not saying you don't prepare, and I'm not saying you don't train. I'm not saying you don't discipline yourself. I'm saying that when you train and when you discipline and when you prepare, you understand that there's a fight around the corner if you're not already in one. as we kind of head towards home here. Verse 27 says, remember, he said, I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, verse 27 says, no, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, I was reading this the other night, and I was trucking along, and I was like, yeah, what? I'm thinking, I'm out here boxing, I'm running, we're going to get it, we're going after somebody. And he's like, the first hit I take is to myself. I'm like, Paul, you a different bird. That's what I was thinking. But the more you think about that, the more you ponder that, the more you study on that, the more you start to see how important it is that first blow is to myself. Because we can be busy telling a lot of people about Jesus, and we can be out there running, and we can be out there doing our thing, and we can be out there, it can be from this side of the pulpit or that one. It ain't just for leaders, We all should be doing some kind of ministry. Kevin McGee was telling me when he said, are you on staff here? I said, no, sir. He said, oh, so you just have a day job to fund your ministry habit. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. I just plumb lost my train of thought thinking about Kevin down there in Kenya. Missions director turned preacher, doesn't work. Disqualified. There we go. We have to put ourselves under that submission. We have to put ourselves in check. We have to put ourselves in line. What we have to be able to do is whenever we are training, we have to train ourselves. We have to take this flesh that is so unruly. It is so mean. It is so, them people that tell me that, humanity is good. I say, bull. It is not good. Humanity is evil. Besides the Bible telling us there's no good in man. Come on. You leave people in a room by themselves and, no rules or nothing, and it gets ugly fast, We all live with that flesh on a daily basis. When things get tough, when the pressure mounts, when life is not going the way you think it ought to be going, it gets real obvious how stout, how strong, how difficult it is to subdue that flesh. That's why Paul tells us all of this is good. You need to train. You need to run a race to win it. You need to keep your eye on the prize. But the best thing you can do is punch yourself in the gut. That's the best thing you can do. You got to beat that flesh down. You got to beat it daily. It's like I think it was some of my dad and his brother telling me a story how they used to basically get whippings every day. Whether they deserved it or not, they were preemptive beatings. Because somebody did something to deserve it and just didn't get caught, so we're going to make sure. I think it used to happen in the Dixon house too, if I'm not mistaken. There were preemptive beatings in that house. It worked pretty good. Hey, we should quit. We need to approach ourselves with that same kind of discipline, And so let's go back as we start to wind this down, start to conclude it. Remember, first we want to be in it to win it. Second, we want to keep our eye on the prize. Third, we want to be intentional. But if you're sitting here today and you hear all that and you go, well, that sounds that sounds like, hardcore. We used to claim that our football team was a members-only team, that you had to meet certain requirements to be a part of it, and it wasn't easy, and you need to think about it before you jump in. And I could see how you could kind of hear what I'm saying today and go, I always heard Jesus made life better. Well, it does. Doesn't make it easier, but it makes it better for sure. So as we bring all this to a head, what I want to make sure that you get from this is there is a race. We do need to win it. In order to win it, we're going to have to keep our eye on the prize, the right one we're supposed to be going after, and you got to be intentional. But what I really want to communicate to you is I kind of want to dangle a carrot out in front of you, because that's not an easy row to hoe. That's not an easy task if you take it seriously. I mean, remember, Jesus tells us, before you jump into this, you better figure the cost. I know this all sounds really good and really nice and really wonderful to have all this grace and freedom and to be set free from everything. But remember what salvation means. You better figure it up, So if you're weighing things out, and I'm going to put another cheap plug in here for Pastor's Wednesday night Bible study on the 11th chapter of Hebrews. I think we got another year in it. We've already done 3. I ain't joking. We just got done learning, we're about halfway through learning about Moses. Like verses 24, 25, 26 of the 11th chapter. And Moses, I don't know if you guys have ever caught this before. I didn't catch it till the Wednesday night Bible study. But Moses, when he left Egypt, it was a calculated decision. And you don't always get that with the Sunday school version of the story. Because a lot of times it goes something like this. Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh. He went out and killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew, and then he fled to the desert. Now go read Hebrews and get you something that can show you what words mean in Greek, and you're going to see something I'm about to blow your mind with. It says that Moses considered... hate when my mind goes blank. All them paint fumes. Hey, we got to laugh. It's the Lord's house. Moses considered the disgrace of the cross as greater than all that he could have had in Egypt. And when you start going back through and picking the verse apart, you find that the writer used the word tekel to communicate that sentiment of the deciding point. Okay, so if you go back, and I don't know if using that word triggered your memory, but if you go back to when Belshazzar saw the finger writing on the wall, one of the words there was tekel. Okay, so now y'all know I do well enough to get a hold of English. I don't do real good with Greek and Hebrew. So what you got to understand what that word means is that word means weighed in a balance. So when you read it in Hebrews, and this is all Pastor Lewis, I'm just telling you what you could be getting on Wednesday night, okay? What you see in that weighing point is that Moses looked at everything that Pharaoh's house had to offer, and he looked at everything that being a Hebrew had to offer, and he intentionally, consciously weighed the two options. And when he put them in a scale, there was more on the Hebrew side than on Pharaoh's side. So I'm going to go back to what our brother Paul said. He said, these guys that are running this race, they're running it for a crown of leaves. They'll turn brown in a few days. Well, these won't, they're synthetic. But anyways, we run for something that's far greater. We run for something that will span eternity further than our minds can comprehend. So as Paul instructs us, and as we obey and as we follow what the Lord is urging us today, I'm here to tell you, all the discipline in the world, all the tough choices, all the doing it right when it seems like everybody's getting away with doing it wrong, it's going to be worth it. We have His Word on it. I can't tell you exactly what heaven's going to look like, but Chip Ingram can give you a pretty good visual of it. We did a 5-week study in our house about it, and it was just absolutely amazing. If you will focus on the prize on the other side of the casket, then you'll begin to understand that it's going to be worth it. And I believe that that's what Paul is urging at us today. He's trying to bring us out from looking at retirement as the goal. He's trying to bring us out of trying to have a nice house as the goal. Those are okay things. I'm not a poverty preacher. You know, Job was one of the wealthiest men in the world. Ain't no problem with money, especially when it's in the hands of tithers. I can not a preacher. But what Paul is urging us to do today is to put things into perspective, to weigh them out, and to understand that, you know what? We got a choice to make. Are we going to train? Are we going to run our race? Or are we content to be a Sunday morning jogger? I know it's funny, but are we content to accept a participation ribbon? Or do we want to be champions? Debbie, if you bring the team up. As we get ready to wind down this morning, it's noon. I'm going to do the rest of this as fast as I can. I'm not going to have a big altar call or anything like that this morning. This is one of the odd messages that as I prepared, I felt like God was really urging two things. One, somebody in here is going through a struggle, at least one of you, might be more. But I know every night when I lay down this week, as I would pray about this message, this is what I would hear. Somebody needs to be reminded that against everything that seems logical, it is going to be worth it. It's a matter of faith. We got to believe it. You are competing for something that is much greater than a crown of leaves. You are competing, you are striving, you are working, you are sacrificing. You are moving into something that is so much greater than anything that you can see on this side of the casket. Keep your perspective focused on the other side. Keep your perspective rooted in where we're headed, not where we are. Make your decisions, make your choices based on where we're going, not where we are. The second thing is there's a heap of us who maybe need to settle that it's time to run a race. That we've been content to accept a participation ribbon. That we've been happy to be spectators. That we've been satisfied. It's time. I didn't see where he said, you young people. He said, you old people. He said, you people. He didn't say, you men, you women. He said, you people. You know? It's time for us to decide that we're in a race. It's time for us to live like we got a game to play Friday night. It's time for us to train like there's something worth winning. Because if they'll go through all of that they went through to get that crown of leaves, how much more should we go through to get a crown that will last forever? How much more should we go through? You know, if the Lord tells you, and I'm not telling you he's saying this to you, but if the Lord tells you, you know what? You shouldn't be watching movies. It wouldn't be no big deal to me because I don't have the attention span for movies. But if he said to you, you shouldn't go to the movies. You know, really, when you get to heaven, what big deal is it going to be that you never saw Pirates of the Caribbean? But you might sit here today going, man, I seen the other 4 or 5. I want to see this one, you know? If you keep things in perspective, it makes it a lot easier to train. You know, when you're running your body to the point where you're about to, see breakfast again, it's a lot easier to do that and be okay with it when you know that you're going to have to run a 5K in 2 weeks. It's a lot easier when you have that thing that you know you're training for. And so what I want you to know is that thing is eternity. The thing is, we're trying to get to the other side and take as many folk with us. We got a race to win. So as we transition into communion this morning, guys, if y'all come, they're going to help me out. One thing that I was convicted about a couple years ago, the Lord used a good friend of mine to do it. We're instructed in the Word to do communion and to do it often. That we're to remember what He did for us. We're to remember the sacrifice. We're to remember. And really what we do today is we celebrate it. It would do us well as a people, in light of what Paul has told us in 1 Corinthians, to, as we do this, as we remember the race that he ran, that we pick up the mantle and do our part. There have been a lot of great saints that have walked on before us. They picked up where he left off, and they continued to work forward. And now it sits in our hands. You know, all the ones that have gone to the other side, they've done all they can do. I want us to use this time this morning to reflect, to once again be wowed by what Calvary meant, to once again understand that you and yourself and your evil humanity ain't worth a whole lot. But there was a Jesus who loved you so much. There was a God who gave up the only boy he had for you. I want you to think about that. As we take time out today to do this, let your mind rest on that. Let your mind rest on what this was able to purchase for you. Let your mind rest on the opportunity that's out in front of us to pick up where the greats left off and to continue running this race, to take our leg of the marathon and to drive it home.